Because I wore this.
There you go.
You can't take it off. All right, we're live, gentlemen.
All
right. Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Abreu. I'm the Associate Director of Programming at City Parks Foundation Summer Stage and Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. We're very pleased to be partnering once again with the National Jazz Museum in Harlem for this very special program. And I just want to remind everyone that we have a full week of programs and a weekend in Marcus Garvey Park with Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. Grab the brochure, check online at summerstage.org. Thank you so much. Ryan, pass it on to you. Thank you.
All right, Paula, thank you very much. All right, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming out today. We're just kind of transitioning back to in-person programming here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be able to continue that into the fall. Just a quick heads up for anybody out there. All museums in New York City now require vaccine verification prior to entry. So if you're coming to any of our upcoming events, you will need to provide proof of vaccination and your ID. So we understand that that's not everybody's choice, but that is a mandate by the state, and we hope that you guys understand and will continue to come out and support what we do here at the museum. We want to get things started. It's an exciting opportunity. We've had a partnership with Summer Stage and the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival for a number of years now, and it gives us an opportunity to tap into some of the big projects that they're presenting at Marcus Garvey Park, and we get to expand on those a little bit. And every year we try to come up with a new creative way to dig into what's being presented and explore it in a little bit more depth. And this year, it's a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about one of the recordings that, you know, if you had a Desert Island Discs in jazz, this is probably on it. Of course, Charlie Parker, Bird with Strings, recorded on Verve Records. And to hear this piece played live with world-class musicians is a real unique and rare opportunity. So we're excited for today. We're going to get started having a conversation about not only that piece of music, but pulling it together for this particular presentation with the Harlem Symphony Orchestra, Mr. Donald Harrison. So we're excited to have them both here. Amadi Azikiwe from the Harlem Symphony Orchestra, Donald Harrison, world-class saxophone player, and then it's going to be moderated by our friend, jazz writer and journalist, Mr. Ron Scott. So we'll get things started. Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon. I just want to say how happy I am to be here, how honored I am to be with these two incredible gentlemen. But I want to welcome you back, the audience, to this great museum, the Jazz Museum in Harlem, because like everything else, it's been closed for a while, so I want to welcome all of you back. So I could easily introduce both of these gentlemen myself, but I want them to introduce themselves so they could give you all of the heat, all of the enthusiasm, and all the excitement that goes with what they've done in the past and what they're getting ready to do on Saturday at Marcus Garvey Park when they do Charlie Parker with Strings. I want to start with Amadi because he's a classical, should I say, expert? I'll say that because musicians are so modest. Someone would say Marty is an exceptional violinist. He plays viola, and he's also the music director for the Harlem Symphony Orchestra. But this is his first time being in the Jazz Museum. So we're going to start with him. And as you discuss your background, I would also like you to add in there why you started the orchestra and what does it mean to the Harlem community.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everyone. Yes, my name is Amadi Azikiwe. I've been the music director of the Harlem Symphony Orchestra since 2004. Our very first performance was here in Harlem at Convent Avenue Baptist Church. We made our concert debut at the Apollo Theater, which was, they remain one of our greatest friends. And so that was, I can't tell you all, what a thrill That was. I'm a native New Yorker, but lived most of my life in the South. So I like to say, raised in 3 equal parts: New York City, Brunswick, Georgia, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I still say y'all. I keep claim to that. I started music when I was 4 years old. I come from a musical family. My mother is a pianist, and she went to a little school down the street called the Juilliard School. And my uncle was a violinist. He went to the New England Conservatory of Music, which is where I also went to school. And my father was a jazz trumpet player. And I've asked both of you gentlemen about him. And he lived here in New York for about 10 years, starting from, let's say, the late 60s to probably the late 70s. So jazz music has been around me at the same age as classical. And I didn't tell you, maybe I told you, but I feel like I didn't tell you, Donald. When I was about 10 years old, our family was living in Georgia. You know how you listen to the radio in the car? 10-year-old me switched straight to the station that played big band jazz most of the time. Even though I was, a student of classical music already. I wasn't trying to hear the classical station. I went straight to the big band jazz. And one of the instruments I picked up a year later when I was 11, when I was a student at the Interlochen Arts Camp, was the trombone. And then after I enrolled at the North Carolina School of the Arts, the jazz teacher, conductor of at the jazz program said, "Amadi, why don't you sit in with the jazz band one day?" So it's been in and out of my life, mostly kind of at a distance, but always with some interest. And when I was in undergraduate school at New England Conservatory, we took a jazz history course. And the thing that I remember that influenced me the most, my biggest takeaway, was studying Charlie Parker. I remember seeing a video of him, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, I've never seen anybody play an instrument so easily as what I'm looking at. And just, when you're young and you discover things, a lot of times we remember that moment of discovery. And so that's how it has remained with me and discovering Charlie Parker. Fast forward, moved to New York. Back in 2015, moved back full time. And the Harlem Symphony Orchestra has, we've actually played at Marcus Garvey Park before as part of the Harlem Arts Festival. And we've played at the Apollo a couple more times, as well as St. Mark's United Methodist Church. And there's also a chamber music component of the orchestra, 5 to 8 players. Sometimes we'll go play concerts. And our most recent activity as chamber players was a residency at the University of Iowa back in 2019. So I am happy to be here today, and so very happy that the orchestra can collaborate with Mr. Harrison. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I just want you to add just why did you start the symphony orchestra in the first place, which you had mentioned to me, and how important it is to the Harlem community.
Sure. Well, I will say that for many years I played quite a few concerts, and I'd always wanted to participate in bringing classical music to wherever it might not be heard as often as other places. When I was about 12 years old, I noticed an entry in the volume of the Musical America, International Directory of the Performing Arts. I think it was from the year 1979. And so, kids love to read and know about stuff. They're curious. So looking, here's what orchestras, who's their conductor, you just kind of want to know stuff. And I saw an entry for the Harlem Philharmonic Orchestra. I said, wow, that's fantastic. And then fast forward maybe, 20 years later, I learned, that orchestra doesn't exist anymore. And so by that time, I'm an adult, and a lot of times in a classical music setting, I would be the only black person on the stage and see very few, if any, black audience members. Somehow the idea seeped into my head, Amadi, in addition to doing what you're doing now, what if you were to try to establish an orchestra in Harlem? So I kept thinking on it and thinking on it. And then I started doing some research. One of the things I noticed, I was reading a book about black musicians, and I saw that the conductor, Dean Dixon, started an orchestra at the Harlem YMCA back in 1941. There was also a Harlem Symphony Orchestra, same name, that was started by the bassoonist Carl Hampton Porter back in 1969. That's the year I was born. And then I learned by reading an article in Jet magazine why he started that orchestra.
The Black Bible.
What's it? Oh, yeah, right. So Mr. Porter started the Harlem Symphony Orchestra because of the assassination of Dr. King. And there were riots that followed. The nation was, mourning. He wanted to offer something, a healing gesture to those of us in Harlem. And so he started the orchestra. And it lasted for about 10 years. And one thing I haven't told either of you, I talked about my mother and my uncle. So my uncle went to the New England Conservatory to study violin. He was about 3 years older than my mom. She went to the preparatory division, so high school and younger. So they were both in Boston studying at the New England Conservatory at the same time. Now, also at the same time at New England Conservatory was a young soprano and violin student named Coretta Scott. And down the street, getting his doctorate at Boston University, was Martin Luther King. And so my mom, my uncle, my grandmother knew the King family. So as I'm talking and thinking about putting together the Harlem Symphony Orchestra, I feel like there's a circle somehow. So there you have it. I feel like it's something that just had to be done. And it's certainly, I'm not the first one so I'm humbled by that. I'm happy to, whatever efforts that I have made and will make, certainly I recognize that as a continuation. And we've had, I think, tremendous appreciation from our audiences in Harlem. Janelle Procope, I think it was after the last note, she came backstage and said, "Amadi, will you all come back to the Apollo Theater?" And so I was, of course, thank you, yes. And we did a very nice program just a few years ago for an audience of students from all different schools that came to the Apollo. And it was kind of a history lesson concert. So we did a marvelous work by my friend James Cohn, Variations on John Henry. So I'm wondering how many students would know about John Henry, the legend of John Henry, before they came to the concert. So I feel like we have made a strong connection. Now hopefully we will concertize more and more as life returns to normal. But our goal certainly is to build on that connection. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I wanted you to mention that because it's always important when we talk about music to connect the dots. So now we see that classical music started in Harlem years ago, back in the 40s, and come the 60s, it continues. Then we have Jazzmobile that brings the jazz to the community, and now we have Summer Stage that is carrying on this tradition and bringing great concerts to Harlem on a regular basis. So with that, I would like to turn to Mr. Donald Harrison. First of all of you have to give him a big round of applause because he's now an NEA Jazz Master 2023. So Donald, I would like you just to say a few words about what it means to you to have received this great honor, and also talk about your role in New Orleans as Big Chief, and from there, your illustrious background.
Yeah, I'm a musician who has been all over the map, and it's because of Charlie Parker. I mentioned a few times that he made a statement that knocked me out in high school. I grew up in the culture of New Orleans, but I didn't start playing music till I was 16 years old. And I loved Charlie Parker because of my father and a lot of different types of music, and also the culture of New Orleans. We'll talk about that later. But Charlie Parker made a statement: if you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn, and there's no boundary lines to music. So that had a profound effect on me, because I was like, oh, you're living here in New Orleans, you got the roots of American music. This is one of the root contributors. You're right here. When I started playing, you can get that from these guys. My father was a chief in the culture, so he was connected to the antiquity, to the music that came from Africa, and the way to look at that from a tribal perspective. So I knew I could get those two aspects going, but then I wanted to learn the whole history of our music through playing with the people who made it up. So I was fortunate that I did get to play with almost every era of jazz and almost every style of jazz. The guys who helped make up funk, rock and roll, I was still around Fred Wesley and other guys from James Brown, from JB's, as well as people from Parliament, people from Cuba, people from Puerto Rico, Brazil, all of that. There's a lot of musicians who helped form those types of music, and they taught me how to put their music together. So I feel like what Charlie Parker said about living the music and being with the people who made it up is present in who I am today and in my DNA. I love Charlie Parker, so I went to play with all the bebop masters who were still alive, and they gave me the lessons that Charlie Parker gave them, all the stuff that they worked on together. So when I listen to, I have a different perspective, because I'm hearing all these nuances and how he did this because of this, and then the drummer did this, and the bass. I understand from their perspective, from the perspective that they told me, what's going on those records, and what's going on in New Orleans music. What's going on with Duke Ellington's music, because I was with the Dukesmen, how to phrase those things, and I spent a lot of time doing that. Talking about Fred Wesley, sitting next to him and getting his phrasing. So when I hit a record, then I know the phrasing of it, because I play with the guys who made it up. So I just want to get all these nuances from all these people, and then put it in the music that I'm dealing with, and pass it down to the young folks, so that the thread continues. I don't know what your question was, but I'm just going to talk about it. I'm off and running. Another thing, and there's another great altoist who loves Charlie Parker like myself. His name is Charles Mcpherson. And I had a great conversation with him. And we were talking about the fact that Charlie Parker's music was inclusive, and most of the greatest jazz masters and classical composers, their music is inclusive. That means that they listen to the world around them and they incorporate it, from my perspective. And then Charles let me know that I was thinking right, because he told me the story of Charlie Parker and Sonny Stitt being in Midtown, and then they agreed that one would go on one side of the street and the other would go to the other side, and they would go work their way downtown with their horns and play with every kind of music, musicians, the bands, everybody that they could play with. And then when they got to the village, they both talked about their experiences and what they learned and what they thought they added to the other styles of music. So they were open-minded musicians, because they didn't say, I play this type of music. They just played music. And now when I talk to Gary Bartz, another person who loves Charlie Parker, he said, it's just music. And so all the things I did through my lifetime, it set me up to look at music like that. And this recording that we're playing the music of, it's a prime example of that. They were orchestral members. Go ahead.
On that note, could you just mention how did it come about that you got this project, and then how did you connect together?
Well, I had done this project with various groups around the world. Fortunately, well, people know I love Charlie Parker, so they call me to do stuff. It's just like, well, a lot of jobs I get is because I was somewhere practicing it, not thinking anybody was listening. And they called me for the Dukesman because I was in the dressing room with Art Blakey. I was still like 22, 23 years old, practicing Johnny Hodges. And I didn't know anybody was listening. And then they called me and said, can you do this? And I was like, of course I can. I've been practicing to do that. So I practicing a lot of Charlie Parker, led to people calling me to do engagements where that sound was apropos. But there's some videos of me doing this. So
yeah, I've seen the videos.
So they called me and said, would you want to come do Charlie Parker with strings for the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival? Naturally, I said yes. And the next challenge was preparing my young musicians to be able to achieve that sound, and they're doing a wonderful job.
That bebop sound.
Yep.
The sound that the audience members saw Thursday night at Birdland.
Right, yeah. They're becoming really, all I did was tell them the same thing that the beboppers told me that I played with. And then they did the work, and they're getting to it. That's probably, in my estimation, the youngest bebop band on the planet right now that knows some of that language, because everything has a little slight language to it, but it's very nuanced and very intricate, and they know how to move around in it. And the next challenge was finding an orchestra of some musicians. So then I started looking on the internet, and I also had some people telling me you should use these guys.
That Amadi's the man.
No, I'm going to tell you how I got to it.
Uh-oh.
So I was looking around, and then I found a Harlem Symphony Orchestra. So then I started listening to the music, and something about it was so soulful that I was stuck on trying to get them. So I made some emails to this young man right here, and some phone calls, and no response. I was like, And they were saying, you got to get somebody, you got to get somebody. I said, yeah, but just wait. And then after about 2 weeks, I said, I don't think he's really realizes that I'm for real, and he might not call. So then we started thinking about other people. And lo and behold, the miracle from up above. he responded and said, yeah, let's try to do it. And I think it was meant to be. And I'm glad I waited, because it was in my spirit to do that. And in my estimation, they are one of the, I like soulful things. They are one of the soulfulest orchestras that I know on the planet. So they have the understanding of the technique of how to play the music in a stylistic fashion that speaks of what it really is. But that element, that extra element of the soul factor, that really comes from your heart, and the warmth of what they do. That's what touches me. And at rehearsal, I could feel it. You know, it's about the feeling. The people don't. All they know is the feeling. You know, and as a musician, if it touches me, that's what we were playing some songs, and it was going through my heart. You know, I told some of the string players, "You guys sound so good. I really had nothing to do. I just." Because they put it together. You know, when a group is really together, it makes it easy for the person playing on top of it, not on top with them, but maybe playing the lead role as a soloist in some spots. And another thing I love about the music is that when we're open-minded, and Amadi is open-minded, because I checked him out. You know, he was doing something. I'm sorry, I got to get this out, and you can ask some other questions. But I was like, he was trying things, and I was like, yeah, do it. So we were going back and forth about how we could approach the music. So there's the openness, you know, Charlie Parker, there's no boundary lines. Because he might have an idea that might change, revolutionize what they're doing. Or I may have something, I don't know what my ideas are revolutionary, but when you're open, you can learn from being, if you say it's got to be like this, then there's no chance. Yeah, there's no chance for, there's another possibility I didn't think about. And then every time you get another possibility, it leads to new. Yeah. So I'm done. Go ahead.
So Amadi, let me ask you, how once he called you, what did you think about that, and what have you done to prepare yourself for the concert on Saturday?
Okay. Well, first, sorry to keep you waiting last year, Dom. My fault.
Sorry.
What is my excuse? I'll say that I wear many hats, but I was also born 3 weeks late, and I've been behind ever since. Just kind of catch up. Well, you know, I will say, in my own solo repertoire, I've incorporated, I won't say jazz, but there are 2 blues pieces, one by Coleridge Taylor Perkins and the other one by David Baker, who I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So in order to expand my sensitivity or ideas. I had been listening earlier to a lot of jazz. But in preparation for this concert, of course, listening to the recordings that you sent, and also other Charlie Parker recordings, and also just trying to get a sense of when you have a group, because if you're an orchestra conductor, you're either going to conduct the orchestra, or you're going to conduct the orchestra and a soloist. That's usually how it works. Sometimes you'll also conduct a chorus. But usually everybody's on the sort of the same prearranged page and set of ideas, right? You're going to perform something just the way you rehearsed it, usually. And if you have a soloist, or let's say you have a piece of people the orchestra knows very well, there is some freedom there. But I also had to think of, now how am I going to prepare myself to listen when I know that the group is its own dynamic? So I'm listening to the group, and you also have to pay attention to what you communicate to the orchestra. So there's a lot of planning for the variables when it's just me sitting in silence looking at the score. And I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to want to hear more of this. So before we even rehearse, I'm marking in the score, I want to hear more. Isn't that weird? That's totally not how I would practice my instrument by myself. But I have to kind of weigh what I hear on the recordings, the way the strings are mixing with the jazz group against what and you know, the other thing is I develop my own opinions, sometimes without listening, sometimes also after listening. I'll say, no, well, I don't think I want to take a break there. So even if it's in the score or if it's in the recording, maybe I'll mark a little question mark because I don't really want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I have my own idea of the performance in my head as I'm studying the score. And so you have to be willing to do more of what you thought of, or less, or none. So whatever ideas I might develop in the course of studying, I have to tell myself, be ready to not do that if it doesn't work, or if Donald doesn't want that, then don't do it. Or let's say at the end of a piece, often there's like a solo that's, it's improvised. In rehearsal, it could be 30 seconds long. In the performance, it could be 45 seconds long. So I have to physically prepare myself to say, okay, orchestra, we're going to go hold, and then another chord, and we're going to hold, or hold just for a short time, depending on what I hear. So I have to mark parts in the score as part of my preparation. It says, no matter what happens, you listen to what's going on. And the musicians in the orchestra know that. So, in fact, when we rehearsed, there were no question about, well, how long is this going to be? Or, how long are you going to do that? Because we're all listening. So, yeah, it's a mixture of all of those things. Know what's in the score, be ready to be flexible. And I have to make sure, and this happened in the orchestra, because I was so impressed by the young people that you're working with. The drummer, he looks the youngest. I was like, he doesn't know I thought this, but I was like, whose kid are you?
I felt the same thing the first time I met him.
People are bringing their children to rehearsal? I'm only partly kidding. But that's great. And I'm just so impressed. And I have to just make sure like in rehearsal and at the concert, that I don't get caught listening and forget to do my job. Like, oh, I could just, wow, they sound great. I was supposed to bring the orchestra in about 2 measures ago. Sorry about that.
So both of you talked about the rehearsal. You only had one rehearsal. So do you feel that you're ready? Because I know when I spoke to you over the phone, you said, yeah, one rehearsal should be fine because we're professionals, you know. And everything that Donald mentioned about Charlie Parker and Mcpherson and all the other great musicians, like you only need one, right? You're already going to burn it up on Saturday.
Well, the music is Amadi was saying, it's an organism, and we're just part of it. So when you get to a certain place, it's just about, he mentioned all this stuff, I'm just regurgitating. That is how you feel at that moment, and being aware. And as he said about my group, you start listening to other people, and it takes you on another journey. I think we were playing Easy to Love, and the orchestra was taking me. I think I did forget to come in one time in rehearsal, because it sounded so beautiful. And I was talking to the pianist, I was like, this is incredible, it's beautiful. And he was like, yeah, it's incredible. I don't know how I haven't been playing with orchestras my whole life. So we were discussing that. And I said, oh, we're supposed to be playing now. And we came back in. So they have, as Eddie Palmieri used to say, when you look at a band, you don't think about all of the hours and the intense process that it took for each of the people up there to play their instruments on the level that they're playing, and to be able to speak musically through that process, and to be able to play together all of these different aspects to understand this is what this note should sound like right here at this moment, and this next note is different. Like he said, to look at a score and get an idea of a sense, the tremendous effort that it takes before getting to that point. So everybody has been through that process and are doing it as we speak. And while we're talking, I might, in the back of my mind, be thinking about some music.
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
Sure.
So I mean, we're talking about music, but I could be practicing what we're going to play while we're sitting here, and remembering things that he did. Oh, when you get that school retard, remember that right there. Just getting that. The more you get it into your system, the more you'll be able to achieve it. All those things, but also, as somebody said, being able to change a little bit for the moment, because it's live music is, even in the studio, it's moment to moment. It's I always say music and the universe are the same. When you look at a tree in the wind, when the wind blows it moves so natural. It's just natural. And so once you become in touch with the natural aspect of music and work to that, for me, that's when it starts to speak. And each of us have something inside of us that helps us to achieve that. Even the audience is part of that. The audience, they do something to us, and hopefully we're doing something for them as we play. But I always feel like we become one organism, you know, part of. So I talk too much, I'm gonna be quiet again.
So although they're straight charts for Charlie Parker with strings, and you kind of alluded to it. So I'm sure you're not going to just go straight, but you're going to do a little improvising here and there, and you're going to do a little improvising, or are you just going to go straight?
We will.
Or you follow his lead?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I feel like we are firm but flexible. Yeah, and we just, if you ask anyone, any individual player in the orchestra, everyone has experience with jazz. All the individual members of the orchestra, for sure. So when we talk about changes or anything, in fact, there was this one spot where we changed a little bit the repeats. Everyone in the orchestra got it before I did. I was the one that had the most questions. Finally, I got it. But yeah, the language of jazz and the structure is understood by all of the musicians. Yeah. So our goal is to be good listeners and to add as much beauty as we can, as much excitement, as much feeling as we can. And my job, I suppose, is to sort of direct traffic and be supportive to the quartet, but also be part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So after this experience with Donald Harrison and his new bebop crew, do you feel that you and the influence of Charlie Parker, of course, do you feel that you may add some jazz to your repertoire with the Harlem Symphony Orchestra?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I have a sort of a season program already in mind and on paper. So hopefully we'll be able to present it soon. But it includes the Suite for Jazz Clarinet and Orchestra by David Baker, who was a professor at Indiana University when I was a student there. And that's one of the blues pieces I mentioned earlier, is one by him. It's a violin piece called Deliver My Soul. There are also two musicians in the orchestra who I know for sure are excellent jazz musicians. And so in addition to whatever orchestral programming that I have in mind, I am going to feature a group of jazz musicians, probably regularly. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about how regularly, but I know, everyone's talent should be seen and heard.
Right.
So I'm not going to say, well, look, this is only, I like what, why don't you play a set or two, or, because I know everybody would want to hear it. So that's part of the future for sure. And then I know that when this was planned for last year, one of the things that I asked Don, I was like, well, maybe I can find somewhere else for us to do this program.
Oh, that would
And
be great.
yeah. And it would be wonderful. And now that after we've done it, I think there's probably more places that we could do it than we actually can. Yeah. But it's been a wonderful experience for us, just rehearsing and getting to know Donald and the band and the music. And I know the orchestra really enjoys it. Yeah. People are calling me and thanking me.
Oh.
Yeah, from the orchestra, yeah.
Wow.
Well, emailing me, not calling me. We know why they're not calling me. AT&T, why?
So Donald, do you think you might incorporate some strings into your group at various points or various times as you perform or do different projects?
Yeah, you know what? I've always loved classical music because I grew up on it. Just as much as jazz, we listen to classical music, and there's so much influence that goes back and forth. Stravinsky loved jazz, and Charlie Parker loved Stravinsky, and when jazz came around, a lot of great classical composers were influenced by it. And vice versa. There's things I listen to that I'll put into what I'm doing with jazz. But I started composing. I just got up, I never studied how to compose classical music. But I said, you love this music, just do it. So then I started composing, and I actually found, I didn't know who to call in America, so I was looking online and found this group called the Moscow Symphony Orchestra. And I've actually finished that piece while we were touring in Russia. So I finished it. I had 2 weeks to finish it and recorded some of it. So I'm gonna play it for you. I'm not gonna play the whole thing, just give you little snippets.
Wonderful. Wow. Very impressive. Yeah. Impressive.
So that was the first piece I composed, and I was able to get it recorded. So I have plans for collaborating with the Harlem Symphony Orchestra, and I'm glad I found this incredible young man. He's a little older than me, but I always call people with your kind of. I call people your kind of spirit, young men. Even him, he's a young man to me. When you have spirit like that, where you're forging forward and have so much depth of knowledge, it's very impressive. And I hope that we can do a lot of things, and I can get some time to write some music and figure out a way to get them to play it, and go tell the world that the Harlem Symphony Orchestra and Donald Harrison want to get together and add something to the library of what we call music in the universe.
So, speaking about the universe, could you briefly discuss your creation of Nouveau Swing and also your concept of quantum music? Because you're gonna be playing that at the concert as well.
Yeah, maybe not the quantum. I got to see if I can get to it. But anyway,
you have two new pieces that you're gonna do for Nouveau, right?
Right. Well, they're a work in progress. We hope we can get to them. I think I can. But the Nouveau Swing came out of the fact that I was always in the dance clubs when I was young. Growing up in New Orleans, they loved to dance to music. But it wasn't really the music that we were listening to wasn't represented in an acoustic jazz format. And then one day I heard that they belonged together. And so I started writing music that had all of those different elements into it. And fortunately, it was viewed mostly by radio, because usually with a jazz record, the music stays on the radio station for 2 or 3 months.
Right.
But the records, when I was in that mode, they were on the radio for 2 years, and they were the most requested records. So it hit a nerve with the people as well. And a lot of the young guys are coming up and they're telling me that's their music that they use to base their music. So it is do something from the heart and see where it goes. But it was just because I love jazz and I love to dance,
right,
that it came in my mind. And I guess it goes back to Charlie Parker saying, if you didn't live it, it won't come out of your horn. So it was a natural outgrowth of that. And the quantum idea, started looking at quantum theory and noticing that there was a lot of aspects of that we use in music. So the way I look at it, music, before I started dealing with quantum theory, is in a can't think of the word, and I'm getting older. Well, we'll get back to that. It's in a certain state, but then really looking at quantum theory, I started seeing that music is played in a two-dimensional state. It's like you go from here and you go to here, here. And it really never changes. But then I started understanding aspects of quantum theory, and I figured out how to put it in a four-dimensional state. That quantum theory is. So that opens up so many ideas that I won't get to them in my lifetime. But I started dealing with them, and it's opening up other crevices for where the music, how you play it, and where it can go.
Yeah, well, when we're talking about jazz, and now, I mean, what you're doing is what a lot of the younger musicians are doing, putting all of their music together. That if you take someone like Robert Glasper,
right,
you know, who came through the whole hip hop era, you know, and he incorporates the jazz, the hip hop, and all of that into his music. Right. The same way you do.
Yeah, but I think I may have a little different perspective because I played with everybody.
Right.
So I got
that New Orleans thing.
No, but when you play with people, it gives you a different perspective. I mean, how can you understand what Art Blakey or Roy Haynes taught you about playing with Bird and then getting on the bandstand playing with them if you never did? How can you incorporate that? How can you incorporate something that you didn't experience?
Right, because that goes back to what
you said. How can you tell a story? It's like when you got up this morning, this is a simple way to look at it. When you got up this morning, you know if you ate breakfast or if you didn't, right?
I hope so.
Yeah, but you know that. You know that. So you can tell that story. So I have my story too. So my story is really different from the younger people because I grew up dancing the jazz in New Orleans. I grew up being around people called big chiefs that are tied to Congo Square, the only place where Africans could play music in America. I know that backwards and forwards. I was around when the old time was around, you know, so they could pass. So when I do something, that comes out from inside.
Right.
So how can you do that if you never lived that? How can they be like me if they never did that? I'm asking you, how can they be like me?
They can't.
Okay, so we're all different. We all got a different story to tell.
Right.
So I mean, the concept of mixing things has always been what music has been about, but it's the way you mix it. Like Bela Bartok took cultural music and put it in his music, but I couldn't do it like Bela because I really don't know that culture that he put inside of his music well enough to really speak from the inside. I mean, maybe if I was around during that time, I grew up in that, then I could speak to that. We all have a different job to do, but so we do it a little differently.
So let me ask you. When you were with Notorious B.I.G., how much did he inspire you?
All music inspires me, but I was in the hip hop before I met him. But I was more in depth because he was at my house every day, and we were listening to different things. So we inspired each other. There's things in hip hop that. Like, if I said, name some artists that Notorious B.I.G.'s experience I'm talking about. Name some artists from R&B that Notorious B.I.G. is using in his rhymes and tell me how he's using them. Nobody's going to be able to. Robert Glasper can't answer that question.
Right.
But I can. I can give you one instance. We were listening to Marvin Gaye, and Marvin Gaye was going, woo! So I said, we could put that in the hip hop. And if you listen to that Notorious B.I.G. records, he's going woo in the records. I know where he got that from, because I was there. So there's a whole lot of little intangibles like that add up to something. And that's why I was saying we all have a different way of looking at it, and a different path. But we can come together and share all of our ideas. And that's the beauty of it. When I'm around Amadi, I'm going to learn something from him. I learned something just yesterday. I learned something just hearing him talk about the history.
Right. Yeah.
And it adds to my knowledge. And if you don't listen to this, then you're going to miss it. You know, I have to look at it, or he has to enunciate it again somewhere. So we're learning something. Everyone in this room learns something from each other that we can carry forth. That is beautiful.
I wanted you to hear a little of Charlie Parker, but I don't know where the sound person.
Which one?
I was going to play Just Friends.
Okay.
Maybe I can play them.
I can play. You can talk while I can look it up.
Okay. So.
You want to play?
Yeah. Thank you.
He was waiting on us.
Oh, okay. You know, and we're celebrating Charlie Parker's 100th birthday, his centennial. You know, and as Donald was saying, each person is his own person, and even today, 100 years later, when you mention Charlie Parker to any musician, it's almost like they take this deep breath before they say anything, because it's almost like, what can you say after that? Clarence Atkins, who was a writer, one of my mentors, we were at Carnegie Hall once, and Joshua Redmond was playing, and it was intermission. And I came back raving about Joshua. And Clarence looked at me and said, "Did you ever see Charlie Parker?" And I said, "No." He said, "Conversation's over." And
well, that ain't nice, but
and that was it.
Yeah, but I mean, Bird just raised the level of the music, and he, for me, he took all the lessons of the past and put them, made them into an amalgamated sound, you know, of his experiences. But all those things that we heard from the New Orleans players, Africa, classical music, all those musicians were all present. The blues, even jive talk, you know, and School of Rooney, you know, those records. It was like early rap records,
Right.
which Charlie Parker played on. You know, so he was dealing with the rap music of his time, and actually talking on the record. He was rapping too. You can hear Charlie Parker going back and forth with the main artist. He's calling him Bird or Rooney. Bird is talking back to him in jive talk. So when jazz musicians talk about rap, I don't think they really heard that Bird did that too. But he was a student of everything. That's the point. And one of the other things I learned is, I think, from listening to a person like him, is that he respected the people. He respected all types of music. So when your music comes from the people, or is inspired by them, and you're playing sounds that came from them, from all types of music, then when they hear it back, you know, part of your story is their story, so they can relate to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's like one string.
Yeah. Full circle.
You know, but yeah. So we have to always connect the dots to all of the music and not accept the categories.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to put down anyone who wants to.
No.
Yeah. What I'm saying, everybody doesn't have to do that. Everybody has to follow their path. But that's my path, and I think that's the path of Charlie Parker. And that's the path of a lot of great artists. And there's great artists who do it another way. You know, we have to say that's the concept. And because of the universe and freedom and all these things, we have to accept other people. We have to accept another guy's idea of music. When we start putting down each other, that's when the problem. If we just say, "Oh, he wants to do it like that," or we start to misrepresent, like Robert Glasper, if he comes up and says, "I'm playing like Charlie. I've been studying Charlie Parker," but he really didn't, then it misrepresents Charlie Parker. So you shouldn't do that. If you really have been doing that, as he said, he took the time to really listen to the recordings. He actually listened to it. Some people wouldn't listen to it. So he got a sense of what it should be, and when he's conducting this, when you listen to it, it's in your ear. And then when you perform it, the performance becomes part of what you are. So I'm always careful of looking at it from the perspective of, this is the only way to do it. This is our way to do it, and what we perceive we should be doing. And this is a result of, I was listening to big band on the radio. I was listening to Bach, however it's put together. And then he's open-minded to say, some people in the classical world might say, "I don't want to do Charlie Parker."
Right.
But he was open to it. So
Right.
everybody has their own idea. But I think it's beautiful. For me, it's perfect when a person is like that with music.
Oh yeah, because the only thing I meant by categories is like, okay, so let's take Charlie Parker for example. He was known for bebop, right? But then when he wanted to do the strings, because it was his idea, you know, to go, and Mercury Records said, yeah, you know, we'll go for that. But after the albums were recorded and released, he was panned by the critics because they had him in the category of bebop, and you're like, why is he doing that? You know, and here we are years later, you know, we're praising him for some of the greatest music ever recorded. You know, so that's all I mean by categories. I'm not trying to.
Oh, I didn't say you were doing it. I'm speaking to the general. I know you. I know you. You're open-minded and you love the music. So I'm sorry if I came off like I was saying it. No, I'm talking about just in general, because I hear so many people, if it's not exactly what they like,
Right.
they put it down. So I just want to put a template out that says, some of us don't do that.
Right.
You know, it's on you, but some of us don't do that.
Yeah, well, we know you don't, and we know Amadi doesn't, and we're thrilled that on Saturday, 6 p.m., Marcus Garvey Park, you're going to be playing Charlie Parker with strings, and we know it's going to be incredible, and we hope Donald Harrison, Amadi come together and record somewhere and do some other things after that. But more importantly, we want to see all of you, Marcus Garvey Park, Summer Stage, Saturday, 6 p.m. Be there.